By the end of this video, you might be ready to pack your bags and head for a more affordable life in Southeast Asia. Growing up, I was sold the American dream. Work hard, save up, retire in comfort. But here's the twist. After 40 plus years of living abroad, I discovered that, that dream is way more affordable in Southeast Asia than it ever was back in the US. So yeah, by the end of this video, you might be ready to pack your bags too, because life here costs less but feels like more. But of course, everyone's American dream is different. So I wanted to make this video so you could get a real feel about how affordable life abroad could be, particularly in Southeast Asia. Personally, I have found that the lifestyle I have here is better than I could ever have imagined. For example, living on my meager monthly Social Security, and that's all I have too. It's very doable here. That would have been impossible in the US. You might be in a similar financial position. No pension from a previous job, no income from a 401k, very little, or in my case, nothing in savings, only Social Security to keep you afloat. And then, not even the maximum amount possible. Yeah, like me, you might not have enough to survive in the US, but you might be surprised to find out that your Social Security and mine go much further in other countries. And if you've got income from another source, oh, well, great. You could live even better. So yes, I've been living here in Indonesia for 42 years, and life is definitely much more affordable here. And I want to give you some examples of costs here in Indonesia. They'd be very similar in other Southeast Asian countries, Thailand, Vietnam, and so forth. Let's start with the biggest savings, and that's housing. Would housing costs be more affordable for you in Southeast Asia? Well, I can say without the slightest bit of hesitation that the answer is a definite yes. Many Americans and other Westerners have their hearts set on living or retiring in Bali. They've seen gorgeous photos of the rice fields and enticing beaches, and they've heard that lots of locals speak English, making the transition to expat life much easier. And yes, your money will go a long way in Bali. Not as far as in Java, let's say in Jogja where I live. Anyhow, that'll come later. You can rent a place in Bali from around $300 to $1,000 a month, depending on the location, the size, the facilities that are included. And yes, you'll find plenty of expats living in Bali. Yeah. But don't you want to get away from other Westerners and live a more adventurous lifestyle? As I said, I live in Yogyakarta on the island of Java, where living expenses are usually lower, much lower than in Bali. In the city of Jogja, rentals can be as little as, let's say 150 to 300 a month. They can be more, but you can get stuff for under $300 a month. Or you can live outside of the city like I do. I do that so I can have a big front yard for my doggies to run around in. And I pay approximately $100 to $150 a month. My place was a fixer-upper, but I figured with such low rent, I could definitely take some of my money. I was working at the time and spruce it up a bit. So when I moved into this house in 2003, I still had a regular job. I was working as a tour director at that time, and I was making a decent income. Nah, not decent maybe, but anyhow. Doesn't that sound like a big savings in housing compared to what you probably pay in the US or maybe some other Western country? But then what about food costs? Well, let me take a look at some food costs, but keep in mind that food costs are not the main area where you'll save. Food is a little bit less expensive here, and the same in other Southeast Asian countries, but you won't see the same kind of huge savings as in housing. I haven't been shopping in the US for a very long time, so I'm not really up to date on US prices. But I went shopping here in Indonesia a few days ago, and I'll give you the prices converted to US dollars of a few of the items that I bought. So one package of eggs, that was 15 eggs, is the equivalent of about $1.75. 5 liters of cooking oil, that's about 11 pounds. It was $7.50. One whole chicken not cooked was $2.50. 1 kilo or 2.5 pounds, no, sorry, not 2.5, 2.2 pounds of garlic was $3.07. A kilo, 2.2 pounds again, of onions was $1.60. And then, by the way, a meal at a small local restaurant can be as little as just a couple dollars. I have an expat friend who never cooks at home because eating out is such a bargain. So, well, what about the cost of transportation then? Ride shares like Uber are pretty inexpensive. I don't know what they cost in the States since I haven't been there since 2019, so that's what, 6 years. But here, I almost always rent a car and driver for several hours at a time. That way, I can shop at many different places and keep my purchases in the car because he drives me from one shop to another, all without dealing with parking. And believe me, parking here can be a nightmare. It's not as convenient as it is in the US. So renting a car and driver works out really well. And for 4 hours, I pay around $20. That's not per hour. That's for the complete 4 hours, $20. Sometimes it takes me longer to get all my shopping done, especially if I'm going to have a pedicure at the same time. So if it ends up being 6 hours, it costs me around $27. Inexpensive, and I don't have to deal with traffic. But if you have a car and you like to drive yourself, well, 1 liter of gas, that's a quarter of a gallon, runs you about 64 cents. Now, healthcare is another consideration. You might be wondering about that. You've probably heard that healthcare is so much cheaper everywhere else. But is it any good? Well, I've had some serious healthcare here in Indonesia, and it was excellent. And I think it's pretty similar in other Southeast Asian countries. Yeah, I've had surgery here, including skin cancer surgery, followed by 25 radiation treatments. Everything was top notch. Let me give you some details. Several years ago, when I had American insurance through my job at an American company, I had gallbladder surgery here in Jogja. I was hospitalized for 4 days. Yeah, that's because my oxygen level, I couldn't keep my oxygen level in my blood good, so they kept me a little bit longer. But I was given my choice of rooms. Sharing a room was very inexpensive, but you know what? I went for a private room. I even picked the top level in the private category. Yeah, VIP was the way they called it. Yeah, I knew the American insurance would laugh when they saw the low cost. And when I sent in my request for reimbursement, yep, no argument from them. I got completely reimbursed. Those 4 days ended up costing about $1,800 for absolutely everything, including the exclusive, expensive, top rate VIP private room with a terrace, no less, doctors, anesthesiologists, medications, everything. Now that I'm retired, I don't have that American insurance any longer. But no problem. I have local Indonesian insurance for around $10 each month. So, are you wondering how much did I end up paying for my cancer appointments, the surgery, the medications, the doctors, the radiation treatments? Yeah, 25 in total. Not a penny. Zero. Zilch. It was all covered by the insurance. Indonesian health insurance does not exclude pre-existing conditions and doesn't have a deductible each year that the individual has to pay out of pocket. So now you want to know how my care was, right? And I've already told you it was excellent, and it was. It was excellent. Not only was my care excellent, but the nursing staff in the hospital was kind and friendly and actually spent time with me to make sure I was comfortable. Okay, so now what about services that involve labor? Well, labor costs are generally far less expensive than in the US. You might expect that. For example, car repairs. Here's a quick example. I had an old junker car a few years ago. It broke down in the middle of the city. A few young men came to my aid and pushed my car into the repair shop and wouldn't even take a tip for doing that. Well, I planned to get a taxi to take me home. Yeah, it was around 2 p.m., and I figured, they're never going to even look at my car until the next day. But one of the workers in the shop said, well, wait until we figure out exactly what's wrong and whether they'd need to keep it or not. Well, an hour later, I was in my car driving home for the cost of $8. That's not a mistake. $8 complete. They'd had to replace a common small part. They had it on hand, and I was on my way again. So these are just a few examples of how affordable life in this part of the world can be. And if you look at the costs that I've mentioned, you'll notice that housing, transportation, and healthcare provide big savings over the US and have made life much easier for me here. So I don't always have to pinch pennies. Yeah, sick of that. So there you have it. Real numbers, real examples, and real life in Southeast Asia. In my case, Indonesia. Housing, food, transportation, healthcare, even car repairs. It all adds up to a lifestyle that simply would not be possible for me in the US. The American dream might feel out of reach back home, but here it's alive and well. Thanks for watching. If this video gave you something to think about and you're itching to pack your bags, hit like and share it with someone else who's dreaming about life abroad. And don't forget to subscribe for more expat stories and real life insights from my 42 years here in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia. Thanks. Bye for now. See you next time.